What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. We have a free pick for you today in the Celtics and Mavericks Game 5 of the NBA playoffs. We're going to get into a bunch of systems I have written down. We're going to get into correlation. We're going to get into, turnover percentages, possessions per game, a bunch of different statistical categories that we can look at to try and determine who's going to cover the spread tonight. If you haven't hopped in premium, we're running correlated player prop parlays through Chalkboard. We have a code to use, code CLV, for an 100% deposit bonus. So make sure you utilize that. The correlation has been on fire. We've already hit 2 of these long shot player prop parlays, and we have another 4 sent out today. So definitely utilize that if you can and hop in premium. Your free pick today is an alternate line in Game 5 of the NBA playoffs. In the finals, and it is the Mavericks plus 8.5 alternate spread. You can get it at MGM, DraftKings, or FanDuel. It's going to be a little juiced. It's going to be at minus 140, minus 145. We like playing these alternate spreads due to the fact that these games are super, super tight. A lot of the information has been baked into this number, such as trends, historical data. All that stuff has been baked into the number, and typically the lines set in the NBA Finals are very, very accurate and close to market accuracy. So we like playing those alternate lines. So we're rocking with the Dallas Mavericks plus 8.5 tonight. And let's get into a little bit of the systems. So these are some systems that I pulled from Vision, really good site that I've been using for a long time. I like to see the trends and the data that back up historical performances. Sorry, my dog's barking a little bit there. But we like to look at the historical differences between two teams, especially in the NBA Finals, and see how different teams perform in different circumstances. So these are all Game 5 systems, along with some generic NBA Finals systems, and we'll break them down one by one. So the first system I like is Game 5 home teams against favorites that have struggled since 2015. So only one of the last 7 Game 6 home teams. This is also Game 5. Game 5 is just a little bit less than this. But it is Game 5 and Game 6, has covered their point spreads, going 3-4 straight up and 1-5-1 against the spread. It's only a 16.7% clip. That is Boston, fits that description. So you'd want to fade them tonight at minus 6.5 against Dallas. DraftKings NBA betting splits. This is a system just based purely on betting splits. We've talked about betting splits a little bit in the past. DraftKings clientele is primarily not sharp, but when you have a ton of volume that is being wagered on one single game, such as like NBA Finals, NFL, Super Bowl, NHL Stanley Cup, it is a good idea to take a look at where the money's going, just to get a feel for how the game might go. So majority handle moneyline wagers have had a brutal playoff run last year, so this would be 2013, going 48 and 39, 48 and 39, and remember, these are moneyline favorites, and that's minus 34.6 units and an ROI of negative 38.4%. So even though it has a winning record, these moneyline favorites are typically juiced, and that is why you see a system like that be profitable. So obviously you'd fade Boston moneyline. Home teams are slightly less wagered options. So hosts in the NBA Finals are 34 and 27 straight up, and 29 and 30 and 2 against the spread since 2013. This is Boston. This is going to be played in TD Garden, I believe. So this fits the Boston description. Boston's at home tonight. Bad shooting games have also carried over negative momentum into the finals. Boston had a terrible shooting game where they got blown out. It was the second worst loss in NBA Finals history. That's momentum. That carries over. It's also a contradictory viewpoint. A lot of people are like, there's no way Boston plays that bad again. But momentum is a real thing, especially in the NBA Finals. They shot way less than 41.5%, and those teams are just 6 and 14 straight up outright after following a terrible shooting performance. Game 5 home teams and favorites have struggled since 2015. Only one of the last 7 Game 5, I already talked about that. But the next one, momentum has been a big factor in Games 5 through 7. So the later the series get, the more important momentum becomes. Especially when you have these higher favorites. Right now, Celtics are minus 6.5, and they covered both times as minus 6.5 against the Mavericks in the first 2 games. But double digit, these teams in Game 5 and 6 that are coming off a brutal loss, such as Game 4, they tend to struggle. As we talked about with the shooting percentage, 8-4 straight up and 8-3-1 against the spread at 72.7% clip. This would fit Dallas. This would fit them going into game 5. The next phase of this process that I want to talk about is determining a team's possessions. So when you're backing an underdog such as the Mavericks, you want to try and find a way to make the possessions that each team has as even as possible. So that's one of the things I look at when capping basketball, especially college basketball, because it's so volatile. But if these teams have a similar number of possessions, there's more likely a chance that the Mavericks are going to cover the number. You can calculate this based on possessions per player, based on minutes per player, and you try to get it balanced out to see how many total number of possessions there will be per game, factor in each team's pace of play, and go from there. So this game is going to be very close in terms of possessions. I think it's going to be very, very close in terms of possessions. Why? Is because Boston's had higher turnover percentage. This is all recently, so this isn't one specific game, but this is just recency. Higher turnover percentage. They've had lower offensive rebounding percentage, which means they're going to get less second chance opportunities as opposed to the Mavericks. Dallas is at a higher pace of play when down. I expect them to be down at some point in this game because they are the underdog, and they tend to increase their pace of play when they're playing from behind. Dallas has a higher true shooting percentage when down 4 to 10 points. Once again, the spread is within that range. I think we see them down between that range, for a solid portion of this game. And their shooting percentage tends to increase when they are down in between that interval. And Dallas has a higher expected minutes for their starters, meaning their starters are playing more of the game than Boston's. Yes, this has something to do with the blowouts, but in general, the Dallas starters see the court more minutes than the Boston starters. Obviously, this is a good thing for the Mavericks because you want your best players out there. You want Luka out there. You want Kyrie out there. You want those guys out there because their production levels are higher than the bench players. And you calculate how much a team's production per player with this formula down here. So the percent of minutes divided by their team total minutes times the entire team's total minutes. So for example, this is just a random player, but say their percent of the minutes for their entire team. So how many minutes are total played in the game? Luka would be at like 15.3%. You divide that by his sum minutes in the games in the series, so game 1 through 4, and then you multiply that by how many minutes are going to be in the game, 240, and then you get his production level, 34.75%. This is just in terms of minutes. Then you would factor in how his true shooting is, how his pace of play is, how his defensive metrics are. And when you go through that with all the players, Dallas's production level is more reliant on their starters. As we've talked about, it's going to be more important to have their starters on the court, which is why I like their higher expected minutes for their guys that are seeing a higher level of production. And then we talk about correlation. So there is actually a correlation in the playoffs. This has a 245 game sample size, but in the playoffs, an underdog spread is correlated with a lower total. So as the total goes down, the more likely an underdog is to cover the game. And that's correlated at 0.42. So 42%, well, not 42%, but 0.42 is the variable that's correlated. So if you see a -1, sorry, my phone's ringing. But if you see a -1, that means it's completely inversely correlated, which means they have the opposite reaction. So as the total goes down, that means the underdog is actually less likely to cover. But if it's a 1, the variable is a 1 correlation, that means it's perfectly correlated. So as the total goes down, the underdogs are more likely to cover. We are seeing a positive number at 0.42, which is a good number. That means it is correlated. This total is dropping, and the Mavericks spread is dropping. So we also see a little bit of correlation within the market and within the lines. I hope all that data helps you guys form an opinion on what you think is going to happen. But we are backing the Dallas Mavericks plus 8.5 on an alternate line. Best luck as always. See you in the next one.